Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the lefts, we go up to the rights, we go up to the middle of independence, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, May the 28th, 2025, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan. On the Frack We Got Here, we do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we do get started, guys, let you know that we do pride ourselves on being a news podcast, which means we only cite our sources from the most reputable places with award-winning journalism. We do not do sensational news like Fox News, The Blaze, wherever you get your extreme left or extreme right views from. We simply don't do that. At the same time, guys, we do try to watch our language on the show, but sometimes words fly. At the same time, guys, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, folks, we are a little early today. Bear with us because life be lifing. However, we must talk about F-47's newest reality show, Pardon or Deport. That's right. Depending on your skin tone, F-47 may give you a pass. He may give you the boot. Don't believe me? Let's look at Todd and Chrisley. Well, Chrisley Todd and whatever his wife's name is, those reality people that were on USA Network for Chrisley Todd, for Chrisley Knows Best. You know, the couple that swindled tens of millions of dollars from banks was accused and convicted of bank fraud. Well, it seems that F-47 has a special place in his heart. And what I mean by that is, I mean pardons.
And Trump tonight issuing pardons to two reality TV stars, Todd and Julie Chrisley, known for their hit show, Chrisley Knows Best. They were convicted of defrauding banks out of tens of millions of dollars. Both Chrisleys convicted back in 2022 and still had several years left on their prison sentences. A White House staffer posting video from the moment Trump called their children to tell them the news.
Give them my regards and wish them a good life.
Mr. President.
Yes. How are you?
I just want to say thank you for bringing my parents back.
Yeah, well, they were given a pretty harsh treatment based on what I'm hearing. Pretty harsh treatment.
Yes, sir.
Trump's pardon comes after the Chrisley's daughter, Savannah, who you heard in that video, made an appearance on a Fox News show hosted by Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump. Senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us now from the North Lawn. Gabe, what do we know about why Trump decided to grant this pardon?
Well, Elson, you just saw that video posted by one of his aides. You know, he was speaking with his children, their children rather, by phone from the Oval Office. Now, in that video, he said that this should never have happened to the Chrisleys, that they were given pretty harsh treatment, as you just heard. And look, a jury found the couple guilty of fraud, including charges related to a tax evasion scheme that went on for years. Now, investigators accused the couple of submitting false documents to request bank loans and using a production company to hide income from the IRS. Now, President Trump has repeatedly railed against what he calls the weaponization of the justice system. He sees himself as being targeted because of his fame. He's said that before. And it was just a few months ago that he pardoned former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, who'd been serving time for public corruption. So late today, Allison, the White House said the president always is pleased to give well-deserving Americans a second chance, especially those who have been unfairly targeted and overly prosecuted by an unjust justice system, he wrote. Now, that was according to a White House official. The president is now expected to officially sign the pardons within the next 24 hours, else.
Gabe, let's step back a little, and you mentioned a different pardon.
Okay, we're just going to stop it right there because, again, you gotta love how they turn around and they sit there and say, well, Trump loves to championship the people that were not given a fair shake, not given due process. Oh, and if they're white. Because that's what it is. You know, rich, famous, celebrity status. F-47 sees himself in all these things. And of course, Fox News, being the state-run propaganda system that it is, will always sit there and say, the crying, bleeding hearts, you will always go to them and say, well, please, our Lord and Savior Trump, give our parents a pardon. Your parents were dodging taxes. Your parents were defrauding banks. The prosecution actually did their job in showing the jury, who, by the way, due process, did actually convict the Chris, whatever the freak their names are, Chad and Julie Chrisley. They convicted them properly. Anywhere were they unjustly, or were they not given a fair shake? Because last time I checked, the last time a guy robbed celebrities, his name was Bernie Madoff, and he's still in prison. So again, this reality show that F-47 loves to play of pardon or deport, he pardons two people who actually got their due process. They just didn't like the outcome. Yes, they served time, still were serving time, and now we're about to get a full pardon. For what? Because again, much like 47, you defrauded the system, you got caught. The only problem with 47 is that at the time, and I will continue to say this, that at the time, 47 was facing multiple lawsuits, indictments, and things of that nature, because he's still a convicted felon. Why he wasn't under the jail was because he whined and cried about, well, this is gonna hurt my election chances. This is gonna hurt me in the election. And I never understood at the time why the AGs didn't sit there and do what they always said they would do. No one is above the law, not even the president, which at the time, F-47 wasn't president. He was a private citizen facing charges from holding documents, from defrauding his properties in Manhattan, to facing sexual allegations, to election tampering in Georgia. Any one of those cases would have put him under the jail. But I always blame the AG. I always blame the AG at the time, Mr. Garland. I blame him because he did not sit there and do what that lapdog of a 47 fan, Pam Bondi, is doing right now. Because Pam Bondi is not an AG. She just knows how to follow orders. Hence why, if you say anything bad about Trump, or if you say anything bad about ICE, we're going to come after you. Really? Freedom of speech apparently is now under fire? But again, if Garland had the same attack status as Bondi did, Trump would not be president. I really believe it. If not the Manhattan case, which, by the way, still has a collection tab on its head, if it not for the FBI case, which, by the way, should have been a freaking slam dunk since this man had a almost damn near warehouse full of documents he wasn't supposed to have and was not about to give them up, or the election case in Georgia, which was clear-cut because we all remember the call to the Georgia Secretary of State saying, is there any way we can find like 11,000 more votes? If it wasn't for any of these cases, they all could have put Trump out of the running. They all could have put Trump under the jail. But because the fact of his lawyers, because the fact the DOJ did not do their job is the reason, well, part of the reason, because it's all a mix, but it's part of the reason why he was allowed to not only run for office, but to also win, because apparently the DOJ will not go after a sitting president. I will never understand that. Every other country, every other modern country in this world has no problem removing a president as easily as they install them. But for some odd freaking reason in our country, the president seems to have this immunity deal where it's like, yeah, he can do stuff, but yeah, it's also illegal, but yeah, we can't go after him. For what? An opinion, not a law. But I'm getting ahead of myself because, like I said, F-47's new show, Pardon or Deport. The Chrisleys weren't the only people he pardoned. He also pardoned a corrupt law enforcement official.
President Trump has issued a controversial presidential pardon yesterday. It was a day before he was expected to start his 10-year prison sentence. And the president pardoned former Culpeper County, Virginia Sheriff Scott Jenkins. Jenkins was convicted in Virginia last year in federal court for accepting over $75,000 in bribes. Jenkins took the money in exchange for handing out deputy badges to rich local businessmen who used them to get out of things like traffic tickets. He was found guilty of conspiracy, honest services fraud, and bribery as well.
In a message on True Social, Trump said Scott Jenkins was put through hell by a Biden Department of Justice and doesn't deserve to spend a single day in jail.
President Trump.
Think about that for a second. This was a guy, the sheriff they're talking about, right? Convicted of federal bribery charges because he deputized businessmen as deputies in his town. Now, these deputies, businessmen, could do whatever they wanted. They could upskirt the law. They could, avoid fines, tickets, things of that nature, because they were deputized. All because they each paid him a estimated sum of $75,000 or more. But again, he got due process. The prosecution did its job. He was found convicted, guilty by his peers. But if you believe F-47, he was done a bad hand. I don't see how. He was about to serve a 10-year prison sentence, which now he's not going to because he's also a winner in F-47's newest reality game, Pardon or Deport. We now have two cases where Trump has decided to step in and pardon people that didn't need pardoning. I mean, we already saw that his administration is going to pay out $5 million to the family of a terrorist, which, by the way, we're footing that bill. The Trump administration is not paying $5 million directly to Babbitt's family. The American taxpayer is, because again, we negotiate with terrorists, and now we're paying them. But again, all of it. He keeps on saying this, and this also this is the disconnect. This is the big ass disconnect with F-47 reality, because he sees all these people, and I hate to say it, they all share a common skin complexion in mind, and at the same time, he's decided they got a raw deal, that they should be given a fair shake. That tells you the level of bullshit that is going on right now. And yet, for all those people that voted for the red hats, yes, the FO part about that bill, which we'll talk about later, let's see how you feel about that when you get to the nitty-gritty of what Speaker Mike Johnson said. But let's get to the other side of this game of pardon or deport, because Trump is trying to move people to a country that they are not necessarily from. Why? Because he loves dictators.
Battle for the Trump administration, a federal judge is demanding answers about whether migrants were deported to South Sudan without due process, violated one of his orders. Our senior national correspondent, Terry Moran, has the story for us. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, Michael. This morning, the conflict between the Trump administration and the federal courts just got worse. This time, a federal judge in Boston is threatening criminal sanctions against administration personnel and others for deporting migrants without due process to South Sudan, a nation on the brink of civil war. Overnight, a federal judge in Boston demanded answers from the Trump administration about whether the government has deported migrants to South Sudan in violation of immigration law. Lawyers representing a group of migrants say that at least two of them, one from Myanmar, the other from Vietnam, have been told they would be sent to the war-torn East African country without having had an opportunity required by law to contest their removal on the basis of a fear that their lives or freedom could be threatened there. According to the New York Times, Judge Brian Murphy said sending the migrants to South Sudan would likely violate an order he issued last month that directed the administration not to remove individuals to any other country beyond the two they are allowed to designate in immigration proceedings without giving them at least 15 days to challenge their removals. An attorney for the Justice Department says the migrant from Myanmar has been returned to that country, but he is declining to share any information about the other individual. And when asked by the judge where the plane is, the DOJ lawyer responded, "I'm told that information is classified, and I'm told that the final destination is also classified." Judge Murphy is now warning that those involved in the deportations who were aware of his previous order, quote, including potentially the pilots, could face criminal sanctions. according to the New York Times. Jonathan Ryan, one of the attorneys representing the migrant from Myanmar, was at Tuesday's hearing.
This judge was very specific in ordering the government not to relinquish custody of any individual who was being brought to a third country.
This showdown is the latest stemming from the administration's aggressive deportation tactics, deporting hundreds of Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador in March.
We are actively searching for other countries to take people from third countries. The further away from America, the better, so they can't come back across the border.
The judge in Boston has now ordered the administration to keep custody of any of those migrants who have already been deported to South Sudan so that they can be returned to the U.S. if he decides this operation was unlawful.
Was? You're basically saying, okay, these people are not from said country. This is the part where I am just, how? How is it that a judge, which I'll give him credit for, he's like, so why are these people being sent to South Sudan? They're not from there. And you're sending them there, and they're telling you, well, if we go back, there's a chance that harm is immediate. Not just harm, our lives could end. And yet, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Trumpet's hand puppet, is saying that we want to get these people as far away from the U.S. humanly possible, that you'll drop them off in a country that's literally a war zone. That makes no sense. That's a death sentence. And even more so, again, whenever it comes to F-47, it's always this level of, if you're not me, or, if you're a certain person of color, because we all know Trump's racist, that he's going to turn around and deport you. Why? Because he said he got a promise to keep by any means necessary. That's why the modern day Gestapo, known as ICE, and Department of Homeland Security are empowered to just say, we don't need due process. We don't. Screw it. At the same time, you have judges looking at them and saying, no, you need to prove the reason why you're able to do this. And they're now telling judges, we ain't got to show you shit. And judges are pissed. Well, everybody's going to be held in contempt. Well, what do you do when the current administration is defying the judicial system, looking at the Constitution, basically pissing on it, and saying what you're going to do about it? See, this is the part where I sit there and say, remember those people that always talked about a government that's tyrannical, and that they're prepping for them, and that we're going to defend ourselves through life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. All you two FA guys who were hard on, going to gay pride, going to pride parties, wearing full tactical gear, looking like an extra from Call of Duty. Where are y'all now? Oh, by the way, you're obviously very freaking quiet, which tells us one of two things. You're either full of shit or you completely agree what's going on. Either way, your silence says a lot. But speaking of things that are going to say a lot, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, but Secretary of Health, RFK, has decided to upend the CDC and basically make a decision when it comes to pregnant women and children and the COVID vaccine. I wish I could make this up.
We want to turn now to an announcement today from Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that marks a major change to vaccine recommendations in this country.
I couldn't be more pleased to announce that as of today, the COVID vaccine for healthy children and healthy pregnant women has been removed from the CDC recommended immunization schedule.
So that was a 1-minute video announcement posted on X, where Kennedy went on to decry the Biden administration for recommending, quote, yet another COVID shot for children, saying there's no clinical data to support it. And the head of the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, called the change common sense and good science. The CDC previously recommended everyone 6 months and older should get a routine COVID shot. This is just the latest vaccine-related change at HHS under RFK Jr., who is, and he's been a vocal vaccine skeptic and has at times trafficked in misinformation surrounding vaccines for decades. NBC News medical reporter Erica Edwards joins us now to talk through some of these changes. Erica, thank you for being with us.
Is there truth to what Secretary Kennedy said and the NIH director are saying about science pointing to making this change?
Hey, Kelly. Well, the answer is no. The CDC lists pregnancy itself as a major risk factor for complications from COVID. During the pandemic, doctors routinely saw pregnant women in the hospital and dying from COVID. Now, today, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists issued a statement saying, "We have seen firsthand how dangerous COVID infection can be during pregnancy and for newborns who depend on maternal antibodies from the vaccine for protection. We also understand that despite the change in recommendations from HHS, the science has not changed. It is very clear that COVID infection during pregnancy can be catastrophic and lead to major disability." Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics also this afternoon told me that it was not consulted about today's change. Meanwhile, pediatricians still tell me, Kelly, that they are seeing kids in the ER sick with COVID.
And how are vaccines schedulally changed in this way? When they make a change on the recommendations, is it normal to do it like this? Because we didn't hear directly from the CDC here.
Yeah, this is highly unusual. Historically, what happens is that a group of independent scientists come together, they discuss the vaccine schedule, and then they make recommendations to the CDC director. Now, we don't have an acting CDC director right now, so that responsibility would fall to the CDC's boss. And today that is HHS Secretary Kennedy. But his announcement today totally bypassed that scientific process that's been in place for decades.
And that's the kind of thing people have worried about with Kennedy's stewardship. Would he be following the norms and the practices here? There's also a factor, a very practical one, about cost. If you change the recommendations, does that impact the price people pay or whether their insurance provides access to these COVID vaccines?
Yeah, it certainly could, because insurance companies rely on those CDC recommendations to figure out which vaccines to cover. Now, Pfizer and Moderna both can charge up to $141 per COVID vaccine. Now, that said, Medicare and Medicaid, important to remember that they require that all vaccines are free to patients. And the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, requires private insurers to cover vaccines recommended by the CDC. But Kelly, as we know today, that group just got a lot smaller.
And many people will have questions ongoing on this. Erica, thank you for your expertise in the report.
Okay, so let's just sum this all up very easily. RFK is a fucking idiot. He is. He is an anti-vaxxer. He doesn't believe in the fact that children need multiple booster shots by the age of 2. He also believes that swimming in a creek is completely fine, a bacteria-ridden creek. This is also the guy who has brain lesions. This is also the guy who decided to take a whale home for studying. This is a guy who also claimed he dropped the carcass of a bear in Central Park in New York. Do you really, really want to take advice from a guy who says the best way to fight a measles infection is by excessive amounts of vitamin A, to which doctors and physicians have stressed heavily not a good idea. And again, he's our Secretary of Health. And I don't know if you guys remember with COVID, again, the COVID in the early days, where there wasn't a lot of information. Everybody was getting sick. Everybody, a cough made more people paranoid. Made more people paranoid when you heard people cough. Made more people paranoid of shortness of breath. How, it was hard to get folks beds with oxygen tanks. Folks were having a hard time just breathing. And now, and remember when the vaccine came out? Oh, well, we don't know what's in it. I've never understood, and this is just me, because I love science. I do. I love science. I love where we can learn from it and what we are still learning from it. But what kills me is we have doctors, physicians, research doctors, scientists, developers, everybody that went into this whole process of developing these COVID vaccines and other vaccines and other medicines out there that have prevented, and for a while, smallpox wasn't a thing. Measles, mumps wasn't a thing. But now, because we have anti-vaxxers who are effing idiots. And yes, I will say it loud and proud so you can hear. If you're an anti-vaxxer, you're a fucking idiot. You are, because you are allowing yourself harm and others around you harm, because you're basically a walking typhoid Mary. I do not feel bad in calling you idiots, because you guys are. Because anti-vaxxers believe that vaccines cause autism. Again, there is not a single shred of evidence out there that links vaccines with autism. Autism is still a relatively new field that is commonly still being researched, and that we know finding ways of diagnosing people on the spectrum. It is still a fresh, a new area, a frontier that is currently being investigated. But everybody in the doctor community can safely say that there is no link between autism and vaccinations, despite what RFK and what other people have you out there believe. Now, here's the problem with this. The fact that he's basically superseding the CDC and saying, well, pregnant women and children don't need this. Do I need to refer back to the early days of COVID, where COVID did not care if you were young or middle-aged or old? It did not care. It went after everybody. And I'm sorry, I do not want to go back to the image of anybody being in bed struggling to breathe, which we covered on this podcast, where folks who actually did get COVID did not get the shot. I have yet to see one person, still do, yet to see one person sit there and say, I wish I could have got that vaccine when I had the chance. Oh, I'm sorry, they did say that. What you hoped they would say was, I'm glad I didn't get the vaccine. Because the ones that didn't, probably not long. There's a few of them that are no longer here with us. Some people got very freaking lucky. But as the vaccine got distributed, what happened? COVID cases went down. Now, is there still COVID out there? Yes, still is. There's still some variants out there. There's still some strains. But much like every other epidemic we went through, it was vaccines that ultimately stopped it. So, RFK, yes, you are putting women and children at risk with this crazy ass assumption for a person that does not have a medical or health degree or experience. You don't. And it's crazy that you're making decisions that could ultimately harm people. And also from an insurance standpoint, like they said, because again, with Medicare and Medicaid saying that all vaccines need to be free, at the same time with the Affordable Care Act making vaccines easier, you're basically sitting there telling the insurance companies, you guys don't have to cover it. And of course, if you believe the insurance companies, the health insurance companies, who are pointing fingers at the drug developers because nobody knows who controls the price. It's just a mystery hand out there. Yes, that could wind up happening is that you could cause these actual vaccinations to cost money. And I'm going to be honest with you, as tight as money is out there, it is, you don't want people deciding between vaccinations and rent, between vaccinations and food, between vaccinations, and you get the point on where I'm going with this. RFK is an idiot. Get vaccinated. Let's just leave it at that. But moving right along, guys, F-47 seems to have a hard-on for Harvard. I don't know what it is. I mean, at first I thought, well, there was that rumor of his son being rejected by Harvard, but it was never actually confirmed. Although that would make an interesting story because Barron applied for Harvard and he didn't get it. So now Trump is mad at Harvard. But again, unsubstantiated. We're not going with that. I'll tell you what it is. I think Harvard is probably one of the very few schools out there that are looking at F-47 and going, you can take whatever degree you have and shove it. Hence why F-47 is ramping up on Harvard by wanting list of people and their nationality of origins. How very Hitler of you.
The president is doubling down on his demand for the names and countries of origin of Harvard's international students. What's the latest there?
The latest is that the GSA, the General Services Administration, is going to send a letter today to federal agencies saying that they need to identify federal contracts that they have with Harvard and whether or not that they could be canceled or redistributed somewhere else. So this is the latest round now between the administration and Harvard, as they say that Harvard continues to engage in race discriminations in its administration's process and in other areas of student life. The president also over the weekend had said that he would take $3 billion allocated for Harvard and shift it to trade schools away from Harvard. But now they're looking at what they can do in terms of federal contracts that have been negotiated between agencies and departments here with the university and shifting away that federal money. Alex.
Now, what's crazy about this, quiet you. Now, what's crazy about this is no one asking the question of why in the world does he want these names? Because he tried to sit there and say, well, we want to prevent Harvard from accepting anybody else that's not American because, you know, they outnumber Americans, whatever imaginary number he came up with. But it amazes me so that Harvard is sitting there saying, we don't have to succumb to you. We don't actually need your taxpayer funding. Harvard's an Ivy League school. Most of their money is not from government-funded programs. So it's amazing how F-47 went from, I'm going to threaten you guys with taking away your funding if you don't stop DEI programs. Harvard said, go ahead. Then he tried to say, well, you guys are going to, we're going to go after your, college acceptance. Harvard said, go ahead. It is amazing. I mean, between Harvard and the governor of Maine, they are the only two institutions I've seen to where they have pretty much told Trump, and don't get me wrong, other people have, defied him as well. But Harvard is standing 10 toes down. And not that I'm a Harvard fan. I mean, it's Ivy League. Okay, cool. But no one expected Harvard to sit there and say, oh, we are going to stand up against this tyranny. Because again, we don't bow down to dictators. So I'm going to be interested to see how long Harvard keeps this up. Do I think that they'll fold? I don't think they will at this point. But it's just funny watching a would-be dictator squirm that he's not getting his way. So expect the man-child with baby hands to probably come up with something else since he can't tariff him to death. But also moving forward in Oklahoma, sometimes you got to give the Supreme Court credit because sometimes they get stuff right. Like making sure that we don't have a taxpayer-funded religious school in any of our states. In this case, Oklahoma.
Just ruled in a 4-4 decision regarding the funding of religious charter schools. Justice Amy Coney Barrett recused herself from this decision, so it now goes back to the lower court. For more, I want to bring in James Sample. He's a constitutional professor at Hofstra Law School. And James, one of the things that really kind of stood out to me is the fact that this was a 4-4 decision. You had Justice Coney Barrett, who recused herself. First, how often does that happen? We know that she's a devout Catholic, but how often do you see this in SCOTUS cases?
Well, the Supreme Court justices recuse on a fairly regular basis. They make their own decisions in their own case if they determine under the statute, 28 U.S.C. section 455 is the congressional statute that regulates the recusal of judges and justices. And it says basically that a judge or a justice shall recuse him or herself whenever the justices or judges' impartiality, and the key phrase is, might reasonably be questioned. So they make that judgment in their own case, in addition to being a devout Catholic, which is not unique to Justice Coney Barrett relative to the other justices on the court. She's been very active in religious education efforts, and including coming from Notre Dame, which is obviously one of the premier religious education institutions in the United States before she stepped onto the high court. So her decision is entirely hers. She's not required to explain it. And in this instance, it may end up being a fairly consequential recusal on her part, because as the special report just indicated, and as Devin and Terry both said, that means that the lower court judgment here, the judgment of the Oklahoma State Supreme Court, which somewhat surprisingly, but also somewhat specifically because of the Oklahoma Constitution's prohibition on religious education initiatives and the tie-in to a free education provided by the state of Oklahoma, in addition to the First Amendment considerations of the Establishment Clause. It means that the decision of the Supreme Court today, as Terry indicated, is not precedent. The precedent is the judgment of the Oklahoma Supreme Court, and that's only precedent in the state of Oklahoma. So the one thing we can say for certain about this issue is that it will come back before the justices in another case, presumably, maybe very possibly from another state. But for now, the question of religiously funded charter institutions, charter education, religious or state-funded charter education of religiously tied in schools remains the judgment of the Oklahoma Supreme Court, which is a surprising victory and goes against the trend of a dramatic expansion of the role of religion and a dramatic erosion of the wall of separation between church and state over the last couple of decades.
James, I appreciate that. I want to bring in ABC senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer, who's also been following this intently. And Devin, can you help break this down for us? I mean, James kind of gave us a little bit of a setup of the implications here, but can you walk us through this case?
Yeah, I mean, this is a case out of Oklahoma, Alex, that had garnered a lot of attention by the religious right because, as James was saying, the conservative majority on the Supreme Court in recent years has sort of cleared the runway for an expansion of religious freedom, both in schools and in public places. And so this was sort of the next logical step. Right-wing groups have been pushing for this for some time, viewing the charter school programs in states as something of a grant program, that states allow private organizations to come in and run schools. And the argument was that if any organization can come in and apply for a grant to run a school, why can't a religious group do the same thing? So they were alleging that there was religious discrimination going on by refusing Catholic schools to be eligible for a charter in any given state. But clearly here that had divided the Supreme Court, even if it didn't specifically answer the question. And as James said, likely will come back. I just wanted to point out, Alex, that this is a significant development for charter school programs in many states. 45 states have charter school programs, 8,000 charter schools in this country, 3.5 million kids attend charter schools. States that weren't even connected to this case were closely watching it because they may have had to discontinue their charter programs or modify their charter programs depending upon how the Supreme Court ruled here. So a big sigh of relief from the charter school movement and from the public school community in light of the Supreme Court's decision leaving this in place, Alex.
All right, a lot to unpack there. Devin Dwyer, James Sam.
So, like I said, I love the fact that the Supreme Court finally gets one right. There should still be a wall of church and state. There should be. That, yes, in Oklahoma, where that superintendent is trying to push religious indoctrination in public schools, was trying to push for a federal funded religious charter school. And here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand, that, okay, if you want, and I get it, okay, I'm from Tennessee. I know education is in the toilet. I get it, that there are schools out there that have quality education that are religious-based schools. If you want your child to go to a religious-based school, hey, and if you have the ability to send them there, then cool. Go ahead and do so. I cannot knock you for it. The thing that I will not understand, and I apologize, guys, my cam decided to die on me, so bear with me for a second. But the thing that I don't get is that if you decide to send your child there, that's fine. You are making a decision for your child. No one is going to knock you for that. However, what kills me is that some areas, or I should say in this case, some schools out there are seeing this as an opportunity. Oh, well, why don't we create school choice? Sit there and say, you want your child to go here. Here's a voucher for $7,000 to $8,000 that you yourself could apply to your kid's school. Now, on the surface, that might be great. I know that could help out with tuition. I'm not going to worry about having to budget, having to trim my budget down. This $8,000 plus voucher would be great. But the thing about it is, nobody is asking where the money is coming from. And it's pulling from public schools. Public schools are federally funded schools. And imagine, if you will, that a certain state legislature is trying to siphon that money from public schools and funnel it into already well-off private religious schools. It's not a dream. It's happening in Tennessee right now. Governor Bill Lee is trying to push school choice on the Tennesseans. And a lot of Tennesseans don't want it because a lot of Tennesseans cannot afford, not everybody can afford to send their child to a private school. Not everybody can. Public school is always the option to where you can at least get a public education to gain some life skills that you will need as an adult. And what they have learned is that in Tennessee, we can't outright get rid of public schools, but we'll go the conservative route. We'll drain it, we'll cut its budget, we'll starve it to death, say it's a problem that we didn't create or forget like we didn't create it, and then swoop in with privatization to where our friends who are well off can enjoy that free government money. Because that's what they try to do in Oklahoma right now. You have a religious group out there that wants to take public funding and be able to control religious indoctrination on public school students. I'm sorry, there is a reason why I'm so glad sometimes the Supreme Court gets it right. I can't say anything more than I am just happy that it worked out that way. But moving right along, guys, we just had Memorial Day, right? You know, everybody remembers Monday, Memorial Day. You know, and on here we'll always say it. Thank the troops out there. Thank a serviceman. Thank a veteran. Thank a veteran, if you will. Thank them for their service. And I mean, just do something small. It doesn't have to be grandiose, like somebody who wants a military parade for no doggone reason. But if you do see a serviceman, whether it's Army, Marines, National Guard, Reserves, Air Force, you guys know what I'm getting at. If they're a serviceman and they serve their country, just say thank you. Or buy them a drink, buy them a beer, buy them some food. Do something that lets you know that, hey, we do care about you. Because conservatives love to go to Arlington Memorial like they did. Say a whole bunch of shit. But when it comes down to it, conservatives don't take care of our troops. And if you don't believe me, here's proof.
Army Staff Sergeant Dan Nevins was deployed to Iraq as a squad leader when an improvised explosive device detonated beneath his vehicle in 2004.
I remember everything about that day, fortunately or unfortunately.
The blast killed his platoon sergeant and took both of Nevin's legs.
The last sort of vision, if you will. And it was my 10-year-old daughter, but she was all grown up and dressed in white head to toe and walking down the aisle without her dad. And I was like, I'm alive. I have to do something to keep it that way.
After a painful and lengthy recovery, which included 36 surgeries and an 18-month stay at Walter Reed Hospital, Nevin started to live life again, even picking up new skills like becoming a certified yoga instructor.
I was like, yoga, that's like wrong, dude. It made the nightmare stops.
When he was forced to retire from the military in 2006 because of his injuries, Nevins thought he'd be financially taken care of, but that wasn't the case.
It's a tragedy, really.
Nevins found out about the so-called wounded veterans tax. Under current federal policy, some injured veterans who retire early, often not by choice, get $1 taken out of their retirement for every $1 they receive in disability pay.
I was told I could not receive both. You could either have your retirement or the VA.
Ahead of Memorial Day, Nevins traveled to Washington to advocate for a bipartisan bill that would give all veterans their full retirement and disability pay, calling on the country and Congress to honor its commitment to veterans.
We should keep our promises. I mean, I teach my kids to keep their promises, even when it's not convenient for them.
Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal is leading the effort.
So they're essentially being penalized financially.
They're being penalized for being wounded.
The bill would impact about 50,000 veterans, currently losing out on $1,900 a month because of the policy.
Essentially, it's about simple justice and fairness.
But the legislation is costly and comes at a time when the Trump administration is looking to trim government spending, including at the Veterans Affairs Department.
What the Doge, Musk, Trump slashing and trashing is doing to our Veterans Affairs Department is absolutely unconscionable.
A spokesman for the VA said the agency does not typically comment on pending legislation and vowed there will be no cuts to healthcare or benefits for veterans. The Department of Defense did not return a request for comment. Nevin's now hoping his personal experience will help inspire action.
If it takes sharing a story or like digging up some uncomfortable wounds, then so be it.
Now, in terms of a path forward, Senator Blumenthal said he's going to try to bring this bill up under unanimous consent on the Senate floor in the coming weeks. And he's also going to try to attach this measure to an annual defense policy bill. But in the meantime, Dan and his fellow veterans are going to keep fighting for this legislation. And we thank Dan and his fellow veterans for their service, not just this Memorial Day, but every day. Gotti.
So what's crazy about this is, conservatives always talk about, oh, we support the troops. And yet the Department of Defense just got a budget increase. Keep in mind, the Department of Defense has failed every audit. Every audit. They cannot account for a penny. And they're given more money. At the same time, folks, you have veterans, much like the man in that story right there, who are simply just wanting to be taken care of. If you serve this country, you should be taken care of. You should be our Veterans Affairs, our VA department, our VA division needs to be better. Should be. I wish for all the money that's funneled into the Department of Defense, why is it that our Veterans Affairs, why is it that that department is, well, shitty? Why is it that soldiers have to jump through hoops to get care, whether it's physical or mental? Why is it that soldiers can't get their full benefits? Why not get your full retirement pay and disability? You earned it. So I do not understand that folks who are in office will sit there every Memorial Day, will go up in front of people, go into Arlington National Cemetery, will go to the tomb of the unknown soldier, will salute. And when it comes down to it, when you have the opportunity to take care of vets, you screw them. I don't understand it. I don't. And even more so, again, you cannot say you support the troops and you pull this shit. Something ain't adding up. But what also isn't adding up is Trump and these tariffs. I keep telling you guys, these tariffs are nothing more than market manipulation. That's it. He's manipulating the market by saying, I'm going to throw tariffs at you guys on this date. And the date comes up and he says, well, we're going to push that back. The stock market goes up, goes down with each of these tariffs. When he put tariffs on China, the stock market was like, oh, we don't like that. When he decided to pull back and renegotiate, stocks went back up. Even more so with the fact that he wants to go after the European Union because they're making deals without him and they're treating him like the kid with head lice. He now decided that, oh, I'm going to put tariffs on the European Commission. And then decided, I'm going to hold off. I kid you not. This, guys, is market manipulation at its finest.
Tonight, President Trump extending the deadline to make a trade deal with the European Union as he threatens to impose a 50% tariff on the bloc of nations. The president saying he spoke with the leader of the EU.
July 9th would be the date. That was the date she requested. Could we move it from June 1st to July 9th? And I agreed to do that. And that she said we will rapidly get together and see if we can work something out.
On Friday, the president saying discussions with them were going nowhere, and that he planned to roll out the new tariff as a result. In response to European Union's top trade official saying trade must be guided by mutual respect, not threats. The EU is one of the nation's largest trading partners, with more than $900 billion in goods exchanged last year, according to the U.S. Trade Representative.
It's a genuine fear that will be priced out of being able to do business.
The looming deadline is especially concerning for small business owners like Joe Carney of Thanos Import Market in Syracuse, New York. Carney buys Mediterranean products like olive oil, cheeses, pasta, and vinegars.
If you could talk to President Trump, what would your message to him be?
Yeah, I would say that these threats of tariffs just aren't affecting these companies and nations overseas. They're affecting folks here and little markets like ours.
Now, Carney is bracing to see how much he may have to pass off costs to his customers. Yamiche Alcindor, NBC News.
So do you see the whole thing? The whole thing about it is that he's basically playing hopscotch. And in the middle of all this are the small business owners. Corporations might be okay, but if you run a small business and let's just say most of your stuff you import or materials that you import, it just goes to show you the game that he's playing is dangerous. But he's only doing it so his buddies will profit. If you don't believe me, look at what folks buy on the stock market. I know stock market, it might be, some people don't like playing in the stock market. Some people do. Some people swear by it. But if you had looked recently at the moves that are being made, that whenever Trump does something, I'm telling you, whenever they do tariffs, some people are buying on the low. And then once the tariffs have been pushed back and stocks go back up, they sell off high. It's almost like a short sell. And I'm telling you, it only benefits his rich friends. But small business owners, everybody in the middle, get screwed. I'm just saying. But also what kills me, guys, is that F-47 decided, I'm going to tell Apple that if they don't start building iPhones in the U.S., I'm going to put a 25% tariff on them. I will let this video play first, and after that, I'm going to explain how dumb that is.
All right, now to Texas, where a bill that will require the 10 Commandments to be posted in every public school classroom in the state is one step closer now to becoming law. The Texas House passed the bill on Sunday after adding an amendment requiring the state, rather than school districts, pay to defend any legal challenges. The legislation now goes back to the Texas Senate for final approval before heading to Governor Greg Abbott's desk. He's expected to sign it. Louisiana and Arkansas have recently passed similar law.
Okay, my bad. Okay, my bad. So, yeah, that's my bad moment. So anyway, let's talk about it. 10 Commandments. I never understood that. But this goes back into that religious indoctrination, the guys I keep talking about. And what I mean by that is, I mean by those who literally and figuratively want to turn around and sit there and say, oh, we want the 10 Commandments in our classrooms. Why? Why would you want a religious document inside of a public classroom? I mean, do kids understand that out of 7 of those commandments, you're not going to be able to apply yourself to? I mean, really, we're really being honest, 7 of those 10 commandments, most people in Congress don't even follow. But I'm going to call it what it is, guys. It is literally religious indoctrination. Because, again, this is why I keep on saying, you want to know how the crazy people got in office? The crazy people got in office because guess what they wanted to do? They do not like the fact that other people out there are not a part of the same religious group you are, or if you're religious at all. So what do they want to do? They think that they know better with their BS higher morality and said, oh, we have the ability, if there's enough of us, to push this through. And again, what do you get out of the religion? What do you get out? I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. What do you really get out of the 10 Commandments being in a classroom? I would rather want my kids to learn English, literature, science, mathematics. Chemistry, geometry, algebra. I want them to learn about credit, about finances, how stocks work, how multiple things out there work. I would want them to learn about trade. Trade jobs. I want them to learn now. I want them to learn so much so they are better prepared as adults when they're older. Forgive me for saying this, but why would I care about 10 Commandments? Because 10 Commandments is not going to get my child better equipped for life. I'm just saying it's basically bullshit and religious indoctrination. That's all it is. That's why I can't stand religious schools. I can't stand religious schools because they focus more on religion than actually educating the child. You rather educate the child to continue the fact that you always have people going to church. versus making sure that child is actually equipped for the world. So again, that's why I say the 10 Commandments is bullshit. Now, let's do this the right way. I think I got the right story about Trump and Apple. Let's give it a shot.
The president making news this morning when he took to a social media channel to say that he had spoke to the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, and warning them that if they didn't start the process of building manufacturing plants in the United States to build the iPhone, that he was going to put a 25% tariff on the company. He just revealed in this Oval Office meeting that it's not just Apple that could face this. It's essentially anyone who builds smartphones. They need to start building them in the United States or they're going to be met with a hefty tariff. How will the industry respond to this?
Yeah, and Ryan, that actually adds a little bit of legal clarity to the question that was naturally floating around there after that original Truth Social post, which is that how could the president have the ability not just to tariff a specific company, but a specific product that that company makes, in this case, the iPhone as manufactured by Apple, in most cases in India. Now, obviously, the president was unhappy about that, threatened this 25% tariff, but even despite all the tariff announcements that we've seen from the White House, there hadn't been up to date a specific tariff targeting one specific company. So the president clarified that he's not just talking about Apple. He said he also name-checked Samsung, which of course makes a lot of those Galaxy phones that are powered by Android. But his suggestion was that that would really cover any smartphone maker that imports anything into the United States. He said, quote, otherwise would not be fair, likely referring to fair to Apple. So this actually widens the scope, though, of the impact of this potential action, because if he did follow through on this, because again, he would need to go through a few steps and get the U.S. Trade Representative and the Commerce Secretary to follow through on this, this would cover essentially all smartphones that are imported into the United States, because we really don't make those here domestically. This would follow through on warnings from the likes of the Consumer Technology Association that this could raise costs on Americans to buy a smartphone. In fact, Wedbush Securities had a note after the president's Truth Social post this morning, warning that a U.S.-made iPhone from start to finish would cost the consumer $3,500. That is colossally more expensive than the roughly $1,200 that it already is charged at currently, Ryan.
Okay, so Trump decided, I'm going to tell Apple, I don't like the fact that your iPhones are created in India. Well, hate to break it to you, iPhones have been created overseas since their inception. So Samsung, so's Hawaii, so is Nokia. So I can keep going down the list. I hate to break F-47's heart. No smartphone is assembled here in the US. All smartphones sold in the US, sure. All assembled smartphones overseas. Apple did at one point have iPhones being manufactured in China. Why? Production's easy. The cost of production in China is way easier, just like the cost production in India is way easier. And I love the fact that Trump's going to try to sit there and say, well, I'm going to put a 25% tariff. For what? See, here's the thing. This is why I say F-47 does not understand anything. He just thinks that he can say something and it happens, much like a dictator. However, here's things about tariffs that he fails to understand. It's just that you could put a tariff and sit there and say, as he said earlier, that he did put reciprocal tariffs on countries that put tariffs on the US. And that he did say earlier this year that those tariffs would affect everything, including smartphones, electronic devices. That alone will cost the price of everything else. That's why if you want a new iPhone, yeah, you'll be paying more. That is the reason why if you want a new Samsung, yeah, you'll be paying more. These tariffs will not make these two powerhouse companies, because let's be honest, Apple and Samsung are the two biggest giants of smartphones, smartphone creation, smartphone assembly and creations out there. Sure, you have some smaller companies out there. Really and truly you do. But when it comes to two biggest boys, it's Apple and Samsung. Now, here's what F-47 doesn't get. Apple and Samsung do not need the US because we're not their biggest market. And that's the thing that F-47 fails to realize. That the US is not China, is not Samsung's biggest market. It's not Apple's biggest market. It's not. Overseas has us outnumbered 3-1. So in the event, let's just say he tries to ban Apple and Samsung products from the US and say, you guys can't sell here. Apple and Samsung will be like, okay, We have our other markets, and the rest of the world will benefit. So again, this whole threat of tariffs makes no sense because there's literally and figuratively no teeth behind this bite. This is Trump again, market manipulation, because your tariffs is a pipe dream. Your tariffs in trying to think that you're going to force production back to the States is a fucking pipe dream. It really, truly is. But speaking of pipe dreams, and again, I have to give some judges credit. Remember when we talked about a while back how Linda McMahon was made Secretary of Education and that her marching orders was to disassemble the Department of Education and that education should be handled by the states? Well, it seems that a U.S. district judge has sat there and said, no, that's not happening. Not only has halted the dissemination of the education department, has sat there and said workers that were fired are to be reinstated with back pay. Now, of course, this is just the latest judge that is slapping an injunction against the Department of Education, against the Trump administration, because, again, this is the reason why I keep saying, if the Department of Education was disassembled, then, my friends, what will happen is that if you put education back in states' rights, red states would fail, blue states would be fine. And those red states who voted the majority for Trump would find out very quickly that their children will be paying the price for their ignorance. But thank goodness a judge has slapped an injunction on this. We will see where it goes from there. But also, in other good news, and I'm going to be really petty about this one. I don't know what's happened lately, but plantations are on fire. This one right here is Louisiana plantation turned resorts. As you can see there, completely on fire, burned down to the ground. Multiple plantations, including some Civil War-esque museums, have all burned to the ground. There is no answer for this. There is no question of arson, although it's being investigated. I am just saying the ancestors are at work. And what kills me about this is that you have some folks saying, well, these plantations are put up for reminding us of our history. Really? So you're telling me that plantation-style homes, which are used to educational purposes, about the horrors of slavery and the injustice of what one race has did, what group of people have did to another. Okay, cool. Let's talk reparations. Yeah. See how quick when I sit there and say, it's amazing that for Black people, that whenever it comes to reparation for slavery, not one dime has been paid out. Japanese Americans were put in internment camps, and the U.S. government paid them millions. And there's a history. I mean, they've paid Native Americans. They've paid Japanese Americans. They have paid other indigenous groups out there for wrongdoings to them. Yet when it comes to Black people, and even the Tulsa Massacre, where you had survivors from that horrific incident get denied reparations for an angry white mob bombing and setting a Black town on fire, and how quickly they want to dismiss it. So the reason why I point all that out is I'm not going to feel bad that a plantation or two burned down. I'm not going to feel bad that a Confederate museum has burned to the ground or a tree has fallen on it. I don't care what act of nature caused it to be destroyed or in ashes. I'll just simply bring the barbecue and celebrate. I got nothing else to say about that. I don't feel bad about that at all. But a couple more stories as we get to our feel good segment, guys. I want to talk about this one anyway because Boeing has reached a prosecution deal with the DOJ over, last couple of months issues with planes falling out of the sky and, not failing safety requirements. I'm going to get to my view on this, but again, here's the deal they put in place.
Boeing has reached a deal with the Justice Department to avoid prosecution following 2 crashes of its 737 MAX planes. The agreement allows Boeing to avoid going to trial next month for allegedly misleading U.S. regulators about the jetliners before those crashes that killed 346 people. Instead, Boeing will pay nearly $1.5 billion for a criminal fine, a crash victims fund, as well as compliance and safety programs. Several of the victims' family members released statements criticizing the deal.
Think about that for a second. Boeing avoids prosecution and avoids accountability by paying $1.1 billion. $1.1 billion. Nobody goes to jail. Nobody goes to trial. Nobody goes to jail. This company is still allowed to build planes. They're still allowed to have military deals. They're still allowed to operate. It doesn't help that Boeing also just secured a $10 billion deal thanks to F-47 with the country of Qatar. So that $1.1 billion versus the $10 billion deal they just made with a foreign country, pennies in the bucket. And this is the part that I will never understand about this Department of Justice. But again, Pam Bondi. Boeing has cozied up to F-47. Pam Bondi's been giving her marching orders. Hurry up and get this off our desk. And this is not the first time Boeing has skirted prosecution. It's not the first time. But it amazes me that only in America can corporations pay their way out of being held accountable, out of potential jail time. Because every other country has no problem putting their executives, their politicians, and bankers in jail. But why in America that, hey, if you got enough money, again, you can damn near get out of everything. So I don't blame the victims of those that were lives were lost in those Boeing accidents. That no, this is small potatoes. It is. Because how in the world can you be happy about something like this at the same time Boeing does not acknowledge any wrongdoing on their part? Again, it is full of shit. But really quickly before we get to Mike Johnson, the reason why you should be worried about Medicare and Medicaid, I keep telling you guys when it comes to strikes that unions work. What I mean by that is, I mean United Airlines, because they were having a problem with their employees. Their employees went on strike. What happened? They decided to reach a tentative deal. 40% of total economic improvements in the first and retroactive pay, a signing bonus, and quality of life improvements. This was actually brought forward toward the union, which they are going to vote on to actually ratify the new contract. I keep saying this all the freaking time when it comes to these unions, when it comes to these strikes. People have no problem. People have no problem working. They do not. They know that a lot of people realize they're not going to be millionaires, and that's fine. But people just want to work to be able to support themselves, their families, not work themselves to death, and above all else, just to survive, enjoy life. It's not that freaking hard. And people always think that, well, people want more money. Well, not everybody can be millionaires. And yet those millionaires become billionaires while the people that actually work for them don't see a raise. And that's what happened with these United Airline workers. They didn't see a raise for a while. And so when they asked for one and was probably told no, they did what everybody else will do. If you will not adhere to our demands, then I guess we're going on strike. And so they did. And for most airline companies, you cannot take a day where your employees are on strike, because that means a day without your employees means hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars lost. So I give it to United Air. I give it to those United Airlines union. And I will always say it best. Unions work. They really and truly do. And if you don't believe me, we have yet to cover a story where a union went on strike and it didn't work. That just goes to show you how truly effective they really are. But the last story before we get to our feel good segment, guys, Mike Johnson doing the Canadian, I won't say the Canadian two-step, doing the Kentucky two-step, because I love the fact when I see journalism calling out politicians in real time, it's exactly what this woman did.
margin. You pulled an all-nighter. Among other things, it will eliminate taxes on tips and overtime, put about $50 billion towards the border wall and hiring Border Patrol agents, keep in place existing individual tax rates, create savings accounts for kids with a one-time deposit of $1,000, increase the child tax credit by about $500. The bill on this is estimated to be between $4 and $5 trillion over the next decade. How much do you think this is all going to cost?
Well, that's about the right estimate, but at the same time, we have historic savings for the American people, cuts to government to make it more efficient and effective and work better for the people. That was a big campaign promise of President Trump and a big promise of ours, and we're going to achieve that. So in the calculation here, there's more than $1.5 trillion in savings, Margaret, for the people. And that's the largest amount, biggest cut in government really in at least 30 years. And if you adjust for inflation, probably the largest in the history of government. So we're proud of what we produced here. We've checked all the boxes. We're all the things that you mentioned in existence, in addition to American energy dominance, investing in our military industrial base, which is appropriate for us to talk about this weekend, and so many other priorities. And that's why we call it the one big, beautiful bill. I think arguably it's the most consequential legislation that Congress will pass in many generations, and it's a long time coming.
Well, just this morning, we did hear from some of your Republican colleagues over in the Senate, where this heads next, that they can't support the bill as it is written. I think you know this. Senator Rand Paul said the cuts are wimpy and anemic. The math doesn't add up. It will explode the debt. In addition to that political criticism, you've already seen Moody's credit rating agency downgrade American credit, and Goldman Sachs says that this bill will not offset the damage from the president's tariffs. Isn't this an economic gamble?
No, it's not an economic gamble. It's a big investment. And look, what this bill is going to do is be jet fuel to the U.S. economy. It's going to foster a pro-growth economy. What do we mean by that? Because we're reducing taxes, we're reducing regulations, we're going to increase and incentivize American manufacturing again. And the effect this will have in the economy is that entrepreneurs and risk takers and job creators will have an easier time in doing that. They will allow for more jobs and more opportunity for more people, and wages will increase. Now, Margaret, this is not a theoretical exercise. We did this already in the first Trump administration. After just the first 2 years, we brought about the greatest economy in the history of the world, not just the U.S., because we followed a very simple formula. We cut taxes and we cut regulations.
You didn't do it in the middle of a tariff war.
We're doing that on steroids.
In the first administration, there was sequencing. You got tax reform. The Republicans got tax reform through and held off the tariff war. Goldman Sachs says the hit to growth from tariffs will more than offset the boost to growth from the fiscal package. That's Goldman Sachs.
Well, I know I respect Goldman Sachs, but I think what they're discounting here is the growth that will be spurred on by this legislation, and the fact that the so-called tariff war is beginning to subside already. You've got over 75 countries that are negotiating new, more fair trade agreements for the U.S. right now because of the president's insistence that that be done. And it was decades overdue. That is going to benefit every American. It's going to benefit the consumers. You know, they howled when the first reciprocal tariffs policy was announced, and they said that prices would skyrocket. That simply hasn't happened. Many of those early estimates were far off. And that's being proven now. So what I think will happen is the tariffs, contest will subside. This legislation will pass and get the economy going again, and people will feel that. They'll see it in their own pocketbooks and their own opportunity, and every American household is going to benefit by these policies.
You know, Walmart has already said that it will have to raise prices. It's not theoretical. And the president on Friday was talking about even more tariffs, this time on Apple and others. But back to your end of the deal here, for this tax relief, you talked about the cuts to pay for it all. You are eliminating subsidized federal student loans, so the government will no longer cover the interest on debt while borrowers in school. You're eliminating $500 billion in clean energy subsidies, and you're terminating early tax breaks for electric vehicles. Alongside that, you're carrying out about $1 trillion in reductions to Medicaid and food stamps. We looked at your home state, and the projection is that nearly 200,000 Louisianans will lose their Medicaid coverage because of this. How do you defend that to your constituents?
We have not cut Medicaid, and we have not cut SNAP. What we're doing, Margaret, is working on fraud, waste, and abuse. And everyone in Louisiana and around the country understands that that's a responsibility of Congress. Just in Medicaid, for example, you've got 1.4 million illegal aliens receiving those benefits. That is not what Medicaid is intended for. It's intended for vulnerable populations, for young single pregnant women and the elderly and the disabled and people who desperately need those resources. Right now, they're being drained by fraud, waste, and abuse. You got about 4.8 million people on Medicaid right now nationwide who are able-bodied workers, young men, for example, who are not working, who are taking advantage of the system. If you are able to work and you refuse to do so, you are defrauding the system. You're cheating the system. And no one in the country believes that that's right. So there's a moral component to what we're doing. And when you make young men work, it's good for them. It's good for their dignity. It's good for their self-worth, and it's good for the community that they live in.
Sure, but first of all, just undocumented immigrants, are not eligible for food stamps or Medicaid. Some lawfully present immigrants
That's the problem.
are. So the 190,000 Louisianas that are projected by KFF as losing their Medicaid, your position is they were just lazy, not working, that they were undocumented? What about them? How do you defend that they will be losing their benefits?
No, what we're talking about again is able-bodied workers, many of whom are refusing to work because they're gaming the system. And when we make them work, it'll be better for everybody, a win-win-win for all. By the way, the work requirements, Margaret, is not some onerous, burdensome thing. It's a minimum of 20 hours a week. You could either be working or be in a job program, a job training program, or volunteering in your community. This is not some onerous thing. This is common sense. And when the American people understand what we are doing here, they applaud it. This is a wildly popular thing, but because we have to preserve the programs, what we're doing is strengthening Medicaid and SNAP so that they can exist, so that they'll be there for the people that desperately need it the most, and it's not being taken advantage of. And this is something that everybody in Congress, Republicans and Democrats, should agree to.
Well, one of your Republican colleagues over in the Senate has been very vocal about his concern in regard to what you're doing to Medicaid. Josh Hawley has been arguing it is morally wrong and politically suicidal to slash health insurance for the working poor. He said the cost sharing language will force people at or just over the federal poverty level to pay as much as $35 for a medical visit, which means working people will pay more. How do you defend that? Because in the Senate, they are going to make changes to this.
My friend Josh Hawley is a fiscal conservative as I am. We don't want to slash benefits. And again, I make this very clear. We are not cutting Medicaid. We are not cutting SNAP. We're working in the elements of fraud, waste, and abuse. SNAP, for example, listen to the statistics. In 2024, over $11 billion in SNAP payments were erroneous. I mean, that's a number that everyone acknowledges is real. It may be much higher than
Louisiana is like the second largest
problem.
recipient of food stamps in the country, sir. So
let me explain it, Margaret. Let me explain it. The states are not properly administering this because they don't have enough skin in the game. So what we've done in the bill is add just a modest state sharing component so that they'll pay attention to that, so that we can reduce fraud. Why? Again, so that it is preserved for the people that need it the most. This is common sense, Margaret. It's good government, and everybody on both sides of the aisle should agree to that.
Well, Senator Hawley objects to that cost sharing language. He is the one leveraging that criticism. This is going to change. You know that when it goes to the Senate. How do you put your Republicans up to have to defend these things when they are facing an election in 17 months?
We got almost every vote in the House because we worked on it for more than a year in finding the exact balance of reforms to the program so that we can save them and secure them. I think Senator Hawley will see that when he looks into the details of what we passed on Thursday. This is a big thing. It's this historic thing, once in a generation legislation. We call it the One Big Beautiful Bill because it's going to do so much, and the America First agenda will be delivered to the people just as we promised. And look, I had lunch with my Senate Republican colleagues on Tuesday, their weekly luncheon, and I encourage them to remember that we are one team. It's the Senate and the House Republicans together that will deliver this this ball over the goal line, so to speak. And I encouraged him to make as few modifications as possible, remembering that I have a very delicate balance on our a very diverse Republican caucus over in the House.
Yeah, well, you've had.
So we're gonna stop it right there because Mike Johnson's full of shit, and it's amazing from where he hails from, Louisiana. All I can sit there and say, Louisiana's in for a shock. I love how she's, and again, shout out the anchor, because she wanted to make sure, Margaret Brennan, I apologize. She wanted to make sure and be like, no, you need to go ahead and be honest. You are literally cutting people off Medicare and Medicaid. Well, what we're not doing, we are simply trying to remove the fraud, waste, and abuse. Because illegal immigrants are on Medicare and Medicaid, and that's something we just can't have. A lie. There is no illegal immigrant on Medicare and Medicaid. Because let's do some common sense. For you to be on Medicare and Medicaid, that means the government has to know who you are, how old you are, has access to your medical records, and has put you through the process of whether or not you're approved. Can an illegal immigrant do the same thing? No. So, bullshit lie number one. Bullshit number two. Well, we're not cutting people off from Medicare and Medicaid. We're just wanting able-bodied workers to go out there and work, because right now there are people out there that are simply abusing the system by not working. Well, if you haven't noticed, number one, the job market's crap. Number two, if you are on Medicare and Medicaid, you're going to stand and tell me that there are able-bodied people that are collecting Medicare and Medicaid and can work. So you want to give a work requirement. The same thing that a lot of conservative states do with their SNAP benefits and welfare, that they require people to work. Here's the problem. Instead of saying they're requiring them to work, you have plenty of state jobs out there that could use filling. Why not help them with job placement? And sit there and say, hey, if you need a job, we have one here in the state. You can work for the state. At least that way it's a steady paycheck. You fulfilled your requirements. I just love how conservatives want to sit there and say, well, there's able-bodied people out there because we're trying to cut down the fraud, waste, and abuse. Really? Doge couldn't find it. Every time Doge thought they found something of fraud, waste, and abuse, what happened? It turned out to be a lie. Conservatives are still touting the lie, and yet they cannot produce anything of fraud, waste, and abuse. But they love to say it. They treat it like it's the boogeyman, that if you say it 3 times, he'll appear in the mirror. That, again, all they're simply doing is they're basically trying to pay for the budget breaks they are giving their rich friends. Because if you make a lot of money, these tax breaks, this big, beautiful bill, is big, beautiful pile of shit. But if you're rich, you're fine. If you're middle class or you're poor, you're hosed. And leave it to this person, because she also said something that was very, very evident. And what I mean by that, guys, she turned around, she sat there and said, do you not think that this me moved to the Senate, that these are the same individuals that are going to have to face their constituents in 17 months or less? Which means, again, hello, next year, that next year is the midterms. Senate and House are up for grabs. And I've said this on my Facebook post. I've said this on TikTok. I've said this on Instagram. Here's the crazy thing. The crazy thing is those Republicans are, they got quite the dilemma. Do we vote for this bill to pass and we damn near guarantee the House and the Senate will be completely Democrat controlled? Or do we vote no on this bill and then watch the cult of baby hands come after us and also have us removed with folks that will do his bidding? Notice I said the Republicans have 2 choices, and neither one of them was thinking about their constituents. But at the end of the day, this big, beautiful bill will remove millions of Americans from Medicare and Medicaid. And although part of me does feel sympathetic, these are actually the very same folks who will be crying if that bill gets passed. Because trust me, if that bill gets passed, F-47's signing it. And then you're going to watch a lot of people get kicked off Medicare and Medicaid that cannot work, that are unable to work for multiple reasons. But in the eyes of F-47's government, we have to pay the rich people. At the same time, they still believe in Reaganomics. If we give the rich money, it will somehow trickle down on us like a golden shower. Not realizing that it's not rain that's going to fall on our faces. We're basically getting peed on and laughed at. But again, Mike Johnson, keep touting the BS. That being said, guys, we are going to move on to our feel-good segment because usually on How the Frack We Got Here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. So sometimes you lose your faith in humanity, but hey, it's Wednesday. Tomorrow is almost Friday, Thursday, and we will leave you guys out some good vibrations. I want to say this because we have had the recent events of graduates from college and high school. If you are a high school graduate, if you are a college graduate, whether you're young or you're old, congratulations on your accomplishment. If no one says it to you, we at How the Frack will say it to you. Congratulations, whether you're a high school graduate, whether you're a college graduate, whether you're post-college, whether you've gotten your master's, whether you've gotten your PhD or your doctorate, congratulations. That being said, LeVar Burton had something he's been wanting to do with Howard University, and this, as a kid, makes me smile.
Y'all have inspired me to want to just sing a little bit of one of my favorite songs. So I'll begin, and I want you all to join in. Butterfly in the sky, I can go.
Now I'm going to be honest. That's part of the good news, part of the feel-good segment that I have. Because number one, Howard University got the pleasure and treat of having LeVar Burton at their commencement speech. However, at the University of Maryland, also got a treat as well, as Kermit the Frog actually gave a speech. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm going to let this whole thing play because, again, Kermit the Frog had some words of wisdom for this group of University of Maryland graduates. And I think the world needs to hear this too.
Hello, I mean, wow, look at this crowd. Look at all these graduation caps with their decorations. Wow. Wow. What a thrill it is to be back here at the University of Maryland and celebrate the class of 2025. And don't forget the summer class of 2024. And the winter class of 2024. Yeah. Did I leave anybody out? No. Great. Good. You are all here. You're all here to listen to a frog in a very tiny cap and gown give a commencement speech on well, what's actually turned out to be a pretty beautiful evening. Yeah. Either way, I can guarantee you the forecast calls for a 100% chance of frog. So here I am. President Pines, Provost Rice, esteemed professors, proud parents, families, friends, fighting Terps, and fellow amphibians, thank you for having me. Let's hear it again for the graduates. Yeah. Now, as I look out at you students, I can tell that you have all worked your tails off. And as a former tadpole, believe me, losing your tail is a pretty big deal. So go Terps! Now, I realize that today is one of the most important days of your lives, so I am honored to share some words of wisdom about three things that are close to my heart. Finding your people, taking the leap, and making connections. Yeah. Now, you and I share someone very special, University of Maryland, and I am talking, of course, about my friend Jim Henson. Yeah, Jim, in the early days, he had a hand in literally everything I did. Yeah, Jim and his wife Jane were proud students right here at UMD when the food at the Stamp was good. Yeah. Back then, they even had mosquito sprinkles for your ice cream. I miss that. And as I'm sure you know, there's a statue of Jim and me on campus, and it is not far from another campus legend, Testudo the Turtle. I hear, by the way, that we are distant cousins. And although I know you rub his nose for good luck, please do not rub my nose, unless you're a fly, in which case I'd say lunch is served. But it was Jim who taught me about finding your people. Jim was a collector. He loved collecting actors and artists and musicians, anyone with talent. You know, Jim shared with me that when he was first coming up with the idea for the Muppet Show, nobody knew what they had. But Jim knew who he had. Yeah, he knew that there was a show there, and he wanted to show the world. And that was Jim. He could always see the spark in someone. He saw the potential. And he saw what was unique in each person. And he taught me what's unique about you should always be shared. And that really stuck with me, which is why you'll see me hanging out with a bear and a pig and a penguin and a prawn and whatever Gonzo is. Seriously, if anybody knows, please see me after the ceremony. But Jim believed that everyone had a place. Jim thought of that, and he made us believe it. And so, my whole life, I tried to appreciate people for exactly who they are, even if they are a pig who hogs the spotlight. Oh, I'm probably going to get in trouble for that one. But truly, there's a spot for everyone in the show. Isn't that right, arts and humanities majors? That's right, I see you. That's right. Yeah, I also see you, biology majors. Yeah, but you're not going to get me to step foot inside your lab. No way, forget it. But congratulations anyway. Look, now there is no guarantee that the show is always good, or that it'll go off without a hitch, or it doesn't have its hecklers. Yeah. But the show must go on. And if you're with your people, then you won't have to do it alone. Because life is not a solo act. No, it's not. It's a big, messy, delightful ensemble piece. Especially when you're with your people. You know, in fact, look around. Seriously, go ahead, look around. You're probably sitting next to some of your people right now. These are friends that you might have for your whole life. And there will be many others to collect along the way. So always keep your eyes open, like I do. Actually, I can't really close my eyes, but always be on the lookout for old friends you've just met. Also, can you be on the lookout for Animal? I hear he hit a few graduation parties last night, and we haven't seen him since. Okay. So once you have found your people, you're ready for what comes next, taking the leap. And leaping is kind of something we frogs know a thing or two about. And judging by the number of you who've left him to McKeldin Fountain at 2 o'clock in the morning, so do you. So do you. Yeah. You know, when I was just a little bit younger than all of you, I used to have a fun in the swamp playing leapfrog. It was our favorite game, or kind of our only game, but we loved it. Except for my cousin Albert. He never actually leapt. He just stepped on your back and used your head like a lily pad. Sure, he got ahead, but it was only by stepping on you. We've been told that that's how you succeed, and some choose to believe it, but I know they're wrong. So as you prepare to take this big leap into real life, Here's a little advice, if you're willing to listen to a frog. Rather than jumping over someone to get what you want, consider reaching out your hand and taking the leap side by side, because life is better when we leap together. And that brings me to my final point, making connections. Now, right now, many of you are trying to make career connections and networking connections and are applying for jobs and grad schools and quietly panicking about rent and loans and the price of eggs. Good grief. I know the past 4 years have brought more challenges than anyone expected. Sometimes it can feel like the challenges just keep coming, but look at you. I know that you're going to be okay because you're here. You did it. And I think that deserves another round of applause. Right now, you're all dressed in your caps and gowns, all grown up, but your family probably looking at you, still seeing you as that little preschooler sitting crisscross applesauce, maybe learning the alphabet from my friend Big Bird on Sesame Street. And for you, that was a lifetime ago. But for them, probably feels like yesterday. Which brings me to one really important connection that I got to mention. And that's the one that you share with your parents or your family or the special people who helped you get here today. And you all know who they are. A lot of them, they're probably here right now. And some of them, they might not be. But trust me, you're still connected to them. You really are. And that's the thing about love. It sticks with you, even when you're apart. So let's give all of those connections a round of applause too. Because if I know a thing, it's important to stay connected to your loved ones, stay connected to your friends, and most of all, stay connected to your dreams. No matter how big, no matter how impossible they seem. The truth is, dreams are how we figure out where we want to go, and life is how we get there. So graduates, I see you. I see you out there. And I know that you will find your people. I know that you're going to take big leaps, and I know that even though you're about to throw your caps in the air, good luck finding them again, I know that you will stay connected to your families, your friends, and your dreams. Because life's like a movie. Write your own ending. Keep believing. Keep pretending. You've all done just what you set out to do. And you're just getting started. And the music's getting started too, which means my speech is coming to an end. But before I go, maybe I could get you all to sing along with me. Here we go. Why are there so many songs about rainbows? And what's on the other side? Rainbows are visions, but only illusions. And rainbows have nothing to hide. So we've been told, and some choose to believe it. I know they're wrong, wait and see. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. Thank you. Thank you, University of Maryland. Thank you for having me. And congratulations to the class of 2025. Yay!
Okay, so I had to cut it there because again, if you got to see LeVar Burton give your commencement speech at Harvard University, Or if you guys see Kermit the Frog give a commencement speech to Jim Henson's alma mater, University of Maryland. Those are both treats. But I had to play Kermit the Frog because, again, the frog always seems to give knowledge and wisdom, especially to this graduating class of 2025. Again, if you are a high school graduate, if you are a college graduate, congratulations. It is a milestone. You should be celebrated and appreciated that this day is all about you guys. But that's going to do it for this podcast. So thank you all for liking, for watching. Let people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Shameless plugging before we do get out of here. Shout out to APR TV. Why? Because How the Frack is actually seen on APR TV, whether on the Roku channel or Amazon Fire TV. Definitely check out APR TV and the multiple shows on there besides ours. You will not be disappointed. Shout out to BlurStation.com, a streaming service that is for us and by us with movies, television shows, content galore. $10.99 a month to stream Blur Station. If you want to, select the Join Now button, select the Blur's Eye View Affinity membership, select my name there, Black Spartan. And again, it's $10.99 a month to stream Blur Station, and Blur Station can be streamed on all smart devices. Trust me, we want to run this up the same way y'all ran up Tubi. Just saying. And finally, run for office. You want to know how the crazy people did it? You want to know how Moms for Liberty did it? Well, this is what they did, folks. They turned around and basically went to the same thing. You can do the same thing as well if you feel the call to serve, whether it's locally or nationally. Definitely go to runforoffice.org, put in your address there, and it will take you the process of how you can actually get on the ballot to how you can run and hopefully be elected. And I cannot stress this enough, guys. We need action. If anything, we do not need a third round. We might get lucky and survive F-47 2.0. I don't want to see 3. I do not. Nor do I want to see the first coming of J.D. Vance either. So if you can be active, get informed, get out there, change minds. I know I live in a red state known as Tennessee, but I still have the hope that one day people will finally get their heads out of their ass and stop voting conservative. That's a hope. As for myself, guys, again, How the Frack We Got Here all together can be found on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, get the word out. Because much like NPR, we cannot do this without your support. As for myself, Black_Spartan615 on the socials. Like, share, and follow there as well. Just don't be weird. I don't want to start blocking folks and they, go from there. Just, treat people the way you want to be treated. Or just be normal. It's not that freaking hard. That also being said, guys, again, I know a lot's going on in the world right now that's unsure. But above all else, don't doom scroll. Put down the phone for a second. Go outside, go have some fun, do something that makes you laugh, do something that makes you happy, check on your people, whether it's a phone call or text, protect your peace. And if you have the ability to make somebody laugh or smile, do so. The world could use more of it. Simply put, guys, as long as we band together, we gonna be all right. The last thing about How the Frack We Got Here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel, guys. We are simply giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind. We do better as a society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right our wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then. Like electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors. Maybe one day, electing our first Black woman be called Madam President. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go about our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Please take care of yourselves and each other. And I promise we'll get through this. Peace.